Okay, so I'm going to do two examples. The first one, I have right here an equation that's written in transformational form, like this. And I need to write it in standard form. So again, this is just sort of a little, I don't know, I guess it's a little sort of calculation thing you need to be able to do. So, the idea is we sort of peel away the strips like an onion. I'd like to have, for standard form, I'd like to have my y isolated. So I'm just going to try to isolate this y. But the way I'm going to do it is first I'm going to deal with that 3, kind of in quotation marks, get rid of that 3. And then I'm going to get rid of that 2. So, right now I have 3 times y plus 2. And I'd like to just get rid of that 3, so what I have to do is the opposite operation. Now there's two things if you think of what the opposite operation of multiplying by 3 can be. You can either say that it's dividing by 3, which is perfectly fine, although something that's more useful in this context is to say that it's multiplying by 1/3. So multiplying by 1/3 is the same as dividing by 3. Taking a third of something is the same as dividing that by 3. So we're going to multiply by 1/3. Multiply both sides by 1/3. Okay, because of course anything we do to one side of the equation we have to do to the other. So 1/3 times 3 times y plus 2. Remember to keep that y plus 2 in the brackets while we're still multiplying it by these things right here. It's equal to x plus 4 squared. Oh, and that, of course, we also have to multiply by 1/3. So the reason this is useful is because because of what 1/3 times 3 gives us. Hopefully lots of you just know that right off the bat, but if you don't, 1/3 times 3. So there's a couple different ways of thinking about it. You can just remember that the times is the same as of, especially when you're dealing with fractions, so 1/3 of 3, and that gives you 1. Or if you're skeptical of that, we can multiply the fractions out. Often if you're doing operations with fractions and you have whole numbers, it's easier to change the whole numbers into fractions too. So the 3 is the same as 3 over 1. And then to multiply fractions, people often remember this as being harder than it is. You just do top times top, or numerator times numerator. And then bottom times bottom, or denominator times denominator. So 3 over 3, 3/3, and that's just 1 whole. Right? So my 1/3 times 3, that gives me 1. So I'll have 1 times y plus 2. So at that point I don't really need it to write it, just like you don't need to write 1x. If you have 1x, you can just write x. So now that leaves me with y plus 2 equals 1/3 x plus 4 squared. Okay, and I'd like to get y all alone, so I need to get rid of this plus 2. So I'd like to do the opposite operation of adding 2. So what I'm going to do is subtract 2 from both sides. So that's y plus 2 minus 2 equals 1/3 x plus 4 quantity squared minus 2, because we have to subtract that from both sides. The reason this is good is because y plus 2 minus 2, the plus 2 and minus 2 sort of undo each other. Like if you had 5 plus 2 minus 2, you just have 5. In this case we just have y equals 1/3 x plus 4 squared minus 2. And so that there is the equivalent of this equation. So here's transformational form, and this is standard form. Just one useful thing to do here is let's just write down what our a and h and k values are. This would be especially helpful to you later. You can use whichever form of the equation is easier to see this. Maybe I'll use the standard form. So I'm carrying it to this. So y equals, up here I've got a, and my a here is 1/3. And then it's x minus h, and I have x plus 4. So x minus what is the same as x plus 4? it's going to be x minus negative 4, because subtracting a negative is the same as adding the positive. So that means my h value is negative 4. And then here I've got plus k, and my plus k is minus 2. That's minus 2. So you won't have to do this part for your homework, but if that seemed tricky to you, you should ask me about it, because that's going to be really important soon. Okay, so that's an example where we went from standard to transformational. And then I'll just do one example where we go in the opposite direction. Okay, so here we've got an equation in standard form. Looks like this: y equals a times x minus h squared plus k. And we need to write it in transformational form like this. Okay. So first of all, we're going to do, and this order is always the same, we're going to sort of get rid of this minus 1, and then we're going to sort of get rid of this minus 3, minus 1/3. Okay, now the way it's going to happen is different, because here we're subtracting 1, and here we're multiplying by negative 1/3. Okay, so to get rid of this minus 1, we're subtracting 1, we need to do the opposite of that. Okay, so the opposite of subtracting 1 is adding 1. So we're going to add 1 to both sides. So we have y plus 1 equals negative 1/3 x minus 2 squared minus 1 plus 1. That minus 1 is just copied down from here, and then we're adding 1 to both sides. Okay, now anything, if you subtract 1 and then add 1 back again, you just get what you started off with. So that's equal to 0, so that's nothing. So now we have y plus 1 equals negative 1/3 x minus 2 squared. Okay, so I'm multiplying this by negative 1/3, and I need to do the opposite of that. We'd like to have this just be 1 times x minus 2 squared. So the question is, what do we multiply negative 1/3 by to get 1? Okay. Maybe I'll write this over here. Negative 1/3 times what will give 1? Now, we know that it has to be negative, because negative times negative will give positive. And 1/3 times what will give 3? And this is essentially the same question we looked at in the last example, although there were no negative signs. But 1/3 times what equals 3? Well, times 3. Okay. You can look back at the example if you're not sure about why. So we're going to multiply both sides by negative 3. Notice that it is negative, right? We were multiplying to get rid of this, and to get rid of the negative and multiplying, we're going to multiply by another negative. Okay, so we have negative 3 times y plus 1 equals negative 3. Now, to show that it's not negative 3, subtract 1/3, we have to write that in brackets, because those brackets means there's no operation between the brackets, so that means we're multiplying. Times x minus 2 squared. Okay, negative 3 times negative 1/3, that's 1. So once we have 1, we don't need to write it. So we've got negative 3 y plus 1 equals x minus 2 squared. And actually we're done. That's transformational form here. Here's 1 over a, y minus k equals x minus h squared. I just want to quickly, this again isn't part of your homework, but you're going to need to know this, well, in the next day or two in class for what you're doing as well. So, what are the values of a, h, and k? In this case, it might be slightly easier to go from standard form. So if you want to pause the video and write down what you think they are, then go ahead. I'm going to show you from transformational form, just because it's a little bit trickier and I want to make sure you have an example. It's not much trickier. So a, 1 over a is negative 3. So the question is, what's a? You can write down what you think it is, and I'll just show you what it is here. Lots of you may, sort of the idea is you just flip it. If 1 over something equals this, then a is going to equal that sort of upside down. But I'll show you why. Negative 3 equals 1 over a. Now I have 1 divided by a, so I'd like to get rid of that in the denominator. I'm going to multiply both sides by a. So here, I guess reverse. That's negative 3a. And 1 divided by a times a is just 1. Now, to isolate a, we divide by negative 3. And there we have a equals negative a third. So if that wasn't what you were expecting, then just go back and look at how it works. So a is negative 1/3. H is this number here, x minus something. Here we've got x minus 2, so that's an easy one. H is just 2. And for k, it's y minus something. So here we've got y plus 1, so that's the same as y subtract negative 1. So those are the values for h and k. Okay, I've got 4 homework questions for you. They shouldn't take very long at all, maybe 10 minutes. Depending on how good or rusty your algebra is, could be a little more or a little less. So the first 2 questions, these are currently in transformational form, and I want you to write them in standard form. So I need you to write down all the steps, and write like I did. Let me just show you again. Add 1 to both sides, multiply both sides by negative 3, or whatever it is you're doing. Okay, so change these to transformational form, and then these two are, change these ones to standard form. These ones are in standard, change them to transformational form. Bring your solutions to class tomorrow. Alright, good luck.